The desert wind whispered across the dunes of Egypt, carrying secrets older than memory itself. In the shadow of the Great Pyramids, beneath layers of stone and time, something stirred. Not alive, yet not dead. Something that had watched over the passage of souls for thousands of years. Something with the head of a jackal and the heart of justice. His name was Anubis. And tonight, we uncover the truth about the most feared and revered guardian in all of ancient mythology. Picture this. You're an ancient Egyptian lying on your deathbed. Your family surrounds you, whispering prayers to the gods. Your breath grows shallow. Your heart slows. And then, in that final moment between life and death, you see him, standing at the foot of your bed with obsidian eyes that pierce straight through to your soul. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, has come to guide you into the afterlife. But here's what most people don't know. Anubis wasn't just some random deity the Egyptians made up. He was the cornerstone of their entire belief system about death, judgment, and what happens when we cross over to the other side. For over 3,000 years, millions of people lived their lives knowing that one day they would face this god. They would have to answer for every choice they made, every word they spoke, every action they took, and the consequences were eternal. I'm about to take you on a journey through one of the most complex and fascinating mythologies ever created. We're going to explore not just who Anubis was, but why he became so powerful that his influence shaped an entire civilization. By the end of this series, you'll understand why the ancient Egyptians believed your heart, literally your physical heart, held the key to your eternal fate. You'll discover the terrifying ritual called the weighing of the heart, where your soul's worth was measured against a single feather, and you'll learn about the beast that waited in the shadows, ready to devour those who failed. But before we get there, we must begin with something even more mysterious, the origin story of Anubis himself. Because before he became guardian of the dead, before he presided over the most important moment in every Egyptian's afterlife, he was born from betrayal, murder, and a love affair that changed the course of mythology forever. Long before the first pyramid was built, when the gods still walked among mortals, there lived a powerful deity named Osiris. He ruled over Egypt with wisdom and compassion, bringing civilization to the people. His wife Isis stood beside him, a goddess of magic and healing whose power was said to rival that of Ra himself. Together, they created an age of prosperity and peace. But Osiris had a brother, Set, the god of chaos and storms, whose heart burned with jealousy every time he saw his brother's success. Set watched from the shadows as the people celebrated Osiris, as they built temples in his honor, as they sang songs of his greatness. The bitterness grew in Set's chest like poison, spreading through his divine essence until it consumed everything good within him. Now here's where the story gets interesting, because Isis, despite her marriage to Osiris, found herself drawn to Set's dark charisma. Some texts suggest it was magic, others claim it was genuine attraction. But whatever the reason, Isis and Set began a secret affair that would change everything. From this forbidden union, a child was born. But this wasn't an ordinary child. This was a being caught between order and chaos, between life and death, between the divine and the mortal. The child had the body of a man, but the head of a jackal, a creature that roamed the desert, eating the dead. They named him Anubis when Osiris discovered the truth about his wife's betrayal and his brother's treachery. His rage shook the very foundations of the earth. But before he could act, Set struck first. In some versions of the tale, Set invited Osiris to a great feast where he presented a beautiful chest, claiming he would give it to whoever fit inside perfectly. When Osiris lay down in the chest, Set slammed the lid shut and threw it into the Nile River. In other versions, Set simply murdered his brother outright, cutting his body into 14 pieces and scattering them across Egypt so that Osiris could never be whole again. But here's what makes this story truly tragic. Anubis, just a child at the time, witnessed his father's murder. He saw the life drain from Osiris's eyes. He felt the cosmic balance of the universe shift as death entered the world in a way it never had before. And in that moment, something fundamental changed within the young god. Isis, devastated by what her affair had set in motion, used her powerful magic to search for her husband's remains. She found 13 of the 14 pieces of Osiris's body and used her healing arts to reassemble him. But one piece was missing, lost forever to the depths of the Nile. Osiris could be revived, but he could never again rule among the living. Instead, he became the first king of the dead, ruler of the Underworld. And Anubis, the child born from betrayal, now found himself with a unique destiny. His father ruled the realm of the dead, but someone needed to guide souls from the world of the living to that dark kingdom. Someone needed to protect the dead from the dangers that lurked in the space between worlds. Someone needed to judge whether souls were worthy of eternal peace or deserved eternal torment. That someone was Anubis, but becoming the guardian of the dead wasn't just handed to him. First, he had to prove himself worthy of such an enormous responsibility. The test he faced would have destroyed lesser beings. He had to walk through the valley of shadows, where lost souls wandered in endless confusion. He had to confront the demons that fed on fear and despair. He had to learn the sacred rituals of mummification, the complex process that preserved the body so the soul could find its way home. Most importantly, he had to master the art of seeing into the human heart, not just the physical organ, but the spiritual essence where all of a person's deeds, thoughts, and intentions were stored. Because in the Egyptian afterlife, your heart was literally weighed against Mayat's feather of truth. If your heart was lighter than the feather, you were pure enough to enter paradise. If it was heavier, weighed down by sin and selfishness, you faced a fate worse than death. You were fed to Amit, the devourer of souls. Picture a creature with the head of a crocodile, the torso of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. 3 of the most feared animals in ancient Egypt, combined into one unstoppable force of destruction. Amit didn't just kill you, she erased you from existence entirely. No afterlife, no second chances, no hope of redemption. Complete and utter annihilation. And Anubis was the one who decided your fate. Think about that for a moment. Every ancient Egyptian knew that one day they would stand before this jackal-headed god while he held their heart in his hands. They knew he would place it on the scales of justice and watch as it was weighed against a single feather. They knew that their entire eternal existence depended on that moment. How would that knowledge change the way you lived your life? How would it affect every decision you made, every word you spoke, every action you took, when you knew that Anubis was watching, always watching, recording every deed in the book of your soul? This wasn't just mythology to the ancient Egyptians. This was reality. This was the fundamental truth that governed their entire civilization. And at the center of it all stood Anubis, the guardian who never slept, the judge who never showed mercy to the unworthy, the protector who would guide the pure of heart to eternal paradise. But his story was just beginning. The transformation of Anubis from the child of betrayal to the supreme guardian of death wasn't instant. It took centuries of learning, of watching, of understanding the delicate balance between life and death. And during those centuries, something remarkable happened. The young god began to develop abilities that even the other deities found unsettling. He could see death before it arrived, not just predict it, but actually witness the moment when a soul would separate from its body. He would appear in the final moments, invisible to the living, but clearly visible to the dying. Imagine being on your deathbed and seeing this towering figure with the head of a jackal standing beside you, his dark eyes reflecting not cruelty, but a strange kind of compassion. Because here's what most people misunderstand about Anubis. He wasn't evil. He wasn't some demon sent to torment the dead. He was a protector. The ancient Egyptians feared him, yes, but they also revered him because they understood something we've forgotten in our modern world. Death isn't the enemy. What happens after death, that's what matters. and Anubis made sure that what happened after death was just. The first time he presided over a weighing of the heart ceremony, the cosmic implications were staggering. Picture the scene: a massive golden scale suspended in the Hall of Two Truths, a place that existed between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. On one side of the scale sat the feather of Mart, pure white and impossibly light, representing absolute truth and moral perfection. On the other side, Anubis placed the heart of the deceased. Not the physical heart, but the spiritual essence that contained every moment of that person's life. Every lie they told, every kindness they showed, every moment of courage or cowardice, every act of love or hatred. All of it compressed into this one organ that would determine their eternal fate. The deceased stood watching, their soul trembling as the scales moved. Around them gathered the 42 judges of the dead, each representing a different aspect of moral law. And in the shadows lurked Amit, her crocodile jaws salivating as she waited to see if she would feed that day. But Anubis didn't just weigh hearts randomly. He had developed a system, a process that was both terrifying and beautiful in its precision. Before the weighing could begin, the deceased had to recite the negative confession. This wasn't just a simple prayer or plea for mercy. This was a detailed accounting of their entire moral life. They had to declare before Anubis and all the judges that they had not committed specific sins. I have not stolen. I have not killed. I have not lied. I have not committed adultery. I have not been cruel to animals. I have not polluted the water. I have not been proud. 42 declarations in total, each one corresponding to one of the judges. And here's the terrifying part. If any of these declarations were false, if the deceased had committed even one of these sins and tried to lie about it in the presence of Anubis, their heart would grow heavier. The god of the dead could see through any deception. He could peer into the very essence of a soul and know its truth. Some hearts were so heavy with sin that they broke the scales entirely. Others were so light with purity that they seemed to float above the feather like morning mist. But most hearts fell somewhere in between, teetering on the edge of judgment as Anubis carefully observed the cosmic balance. When a heart proved to be pure, when it balanced perfectly with Maat's feather, something magical happened. The deceased would be transformed. Their earthly body would be left behind, and they would be given a new form, a spiritual body that could exist in the realm of Osiris forever. They would join the blessed dead in the field of reeds, an eternal paradise where the sun always shone, where crops grew without effort, where there was no pain, no sorrow, no fear. But when a heart was too heavy, when it sank below the feather, under the weight of accumulated sin, Anubis would nod solemnly to Amit. The devourer would spring forward with terrifying speed, her massive jaws clamping down on the failed soul. The sound that echoed through the Hall of Two Truths in those moments was said to be the most horrible thing any being could hear. It wasn't just the crunch of spiritual essence being destroyed, it was the sound of complete and utter finality. No screaming, because there was nothing left to scream. No suffering, because there was nothing left to suffer. Just nothing. Eternal, absolute nothing. This process, this weighing of hearts, became the central ritual of Egyptian death practices. But Anubis didn't stop there. He understood that death was just the beginning of a much longer journey. So he developed an entire system of protection for the dead, a series of rituals and safeguards that would help souls navigate the dangerous passage from life to afterlife. The most important of these was mummification. But this wasn't just about preserving the body. This was about creating a spiritual anchor, a way for the soul to find its way back to its earthly form, if needed during the long journey through the underworld. Anubis himself oversaw the first mummification, teaching the priests the sacred techniques that would preserve not just flesh, but the spiritual essence within. He showed them how to remove the organs and place them in canopic jars protected by the 4 sons of Horus. He taught them the prayers and incantations that would bind the soul to the body even after death. He revealed the secret of the natron salt that would dry the flesh without destroying its spiritual connection to the deceased. And most importantly, he taught them about the amulets, small carved objects made from gold, silver, and precious stones that would be placed on the mummy to provide protection during the journey through the underworld. The scarab beetle over the heart to ensure it would beat again in the afterlife. The eye of Horus to provide sight in the darkness. The ankh to grant eternal life. Each amulet was more than just decoration. Each one was a piece of Anubis's own power, a fragment of his divine protection extended to the dead. When a soul encountered the demons and monsters that lurked in the space between worlds, these amulets would flare with the jackal god's authority, forcing the creatures to step aside. But even with all these protections, the journey was never guaranteed. The underworld was a maze of tunnels, chambers, and passages filled with tests and trials. Souls had to navigate rivers of fire, cross bridges guarded by serpents, and answer riddles posed by sphinx-like creatures. At every step, they could be led astray, lost forever in the darkness. That's why Anubis created the Book of the Dead. Not a single book, but a collection of spells, prayers, and instructions that would guide souls through every challenge they might face. These weren't just words on papyrus. These were powerful incantations that could open locked doors, calm angry demons, and light the way through the deepest darkness. The wealthy could afford elaborate versions of these texts, beautifully illustrated scrolls that would be buried with them. The poor made do with simpler versions, sometimes just a few key spells written on scraps of papyrus. But Anubis made sure that everyone, regardless of their station in life, had access to the knowledge they would need to navigate the afterlife. Because in death, he understood, all souls were equal. The pharaoh and the farmer would face the same tests, the same judgment, the same weighing of their hearts. Social status meant nothing in the Hall of Two Truths. Only the purity of the soul mattered. And as the centuries passed, as Egypt grew from a collection of small kingdoms into a mighty empire, Anubis's influence spread. His temples rose in every city, his priests trained in every village. The rituals he established became so deeply embedded in Egyptian culture that they influenced everything from architecture to art to daily behavior. People lived their entire lives preparing for the moment they would meet him. They kept their hearts light not just out of moral conviction, but out of practical necessity. They knew that every deed would be weighed, every word would be measured, every thought would be examined by the god with the jackal's head and the scales of justice. But Anubis was about to face his greatest challenge yet, because the world was changing and new powers were rising that would threaten not just Egypt, but the very concept of divine judgment itself. So here we are, at the end of our journey through the sands of time, having witnessed the rise of perhaps the most powerful and enduring figure in all of mythology. We've seen Anubis transform from a child born of betrayal into the ultimate guardian of the dead. We've explored how his weighing of hearts became the foundation of an entire civilization's moral code. We've discovered how his rituals of mummification and protection shaped not just Egyptian culture, but our understanding of death itself. But here's the question that should haunt you as you close this video. If you truly knew, that every choice you made was being recorded, that every deed would one day be weighed on cosmic scales, how would that change the way you live? The ancient Egyptians lived with this certainty for 3,000 years. They built their entire society around the knowledge that Anubis was watching, always watching, preparing for the moment when they would stand before him with their hearts in his hands. Today, we've lost that certainty. We've forgotten the weight of our actions, the permanent nature of our choices. But maybe, just maybe, we need to remember what those desert people understood so clearly. That in the end, when the final breath leaves our bodies, only one thing matters: the weight of our hearts. What is your view about this ancient wisdom? Where are you watching from? If this journey through the realm of Anubis moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Subscribe for more explorations into the mysteries that shaped our world.